There's a pool in the West Texas desert where the water you're floating in fell as rain more than 10,000 years ago and traveled underground for roughly 400 miles to reach you. That's not a slogan. Scientists confirmed it with carbon isotopes, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where it is. We found 10 places in Texas where the water turns a color that has no business existing here. Turquoise, jade, cobalt, the blue-green that usually requires a passport. Most of them never surface when you search for Texas travel, because most of them aren't beaches. One is an island nobody lives on, guarded by a lighthouse the Confederate Army tried to blow up. One is a spring so beautiful people keep swimming in it even though 9 divers never came back out. And one is a subtropical jungle on American soil that you reach by driving through a gate in the border wall. Subscribe if you're tired of travel videos showing you the same 5 places with the filter cranked to maximum. Here we show the parts of America nobody bothered to market, and this list isn't random. Texas makes this color 3 ways: ancient limestone, desert artesian springs, and clean Gulf currents in the far south. Every place here is one of those 3, and as we count down, they get harder to reach. Let's get into it. Number 10, the Blue Lagoon, Huntsville. There is an airplane at the bottom of number 10. There are also sunken boats down there, sitting in water the color of a Bahamas postcard, roughly 70 miles north of Houston in the middle of the East Texas pine forest. None of it was designed. This place exists because somebody stopped digging. Buried in the woods near Huntsville sit 2 abandoned limestone quarries. Workers pulled rock out of the ground, walked away, and groundwater did the rest. With almost no runoff, no river feeding its silt, and no farmland draining into it, the water settled into something the East Texas pine belt has no right to produce. On a good day, divers report visibility past 30 feet, and from above, the color reads as flat tropical turquoise, the kind of blue that gets photographers accused of editing. Here's the part every listicle leaves out. It isn't really a swimming hole. It's a scuba training facility. Certified divers claim reservations first, and swimmers get whatever slots remain decided daily, which means on a busy weekend, there may be no room at all. That sounds like a barrier. It works as a preservation system. Capacity is capped by dive slots rather than parking spaces, so this place will never suffer the slow death that hits pretty water once it goes viral. Underwater, the appeal turns from tropical to strange. Operators have sunk training platforms, boats, and an aircraft into the quarries so students have something to navigate around. There's essentially no fish life and no vegetation, just empty blue space and man-made wreckage sitting in it. Perfectly preserved because nothing living down there is breaking it apart. Get in, and the first thing you notice is the silence. No current, no waves, nothing moving. Drop below about 15 feet and the temperature falls off a shelf. The light goes from gold to flat aquarium blue, and the pine trees overhead vanish completely. And this turquoise lagoon sits minutes from a town far better known for housing the headquarters of the Texas prison system. 2 things with nothing in common, sharing the same pine trees. So quick one before we move on. Would you rather swim somewhere beautiful that's completely artificial, or somewhere natural that's genuinely dangerous? Type it below and hold that thought because number 9 is the second option and it has killed people. Number 9, Jacob's Well, Wimberley. Number 9 is the most beautiful thing on this list and it has the highest body count. In the hill country outside Wimberley, there's a circular opening in a creek bed, roughly 12 feet across, filled with water so clear that from above it reads as a hole punched straight through the earth. When settlers reached it around 1850, it wasn't a swimming hole. It was an artesian fountain pushing water several feet into the air, powerful enough that they named it after the biblical well. It holds a constant 68 degrees, which in a Texas August is less refreshing and more like being slapped awake. Then you look down and the geology stops being charming. Jacob's Well is the mouth of one of the largest underwater cave systems in Texas. Divers with the Jacob's Well Exploration Project have mapped a main passage running roughly 4,500 feet from the surface and dropping to about 137 feet deep. It's a maze of false chambers that look like exits and end in solid rock, and at points the passage narrows to roughly 15 inches. Between 1964 and 1984, 9 divers died in it, 8 men and 1 woman. Most were open water certified rather than cave certified, the underwater equivalent of taking a sedan van onto a rock crawling trail. In September 1979, two divers in their early 20s went in after midnight and never surfaced. Recovery crews brought in a decompression chamber and banks of compressors, and after 12 days the search was called off. At some point, a local diver bolted an iron grate over the entrance to the worst passage. Someone removed it and left behind a note scrawled on plastic that said they couldn't be kept out. The rules now are simple. Recreational cave diving is banned, and since 2022, swimming has been closed entirely, though not because of the deaths. It's water levels. Pumping and drought in the Trinity Aquifer dropped the spring low enough that the county called it unsafe, and the well has stopped flowing outright in recent dry years, something that never happened in recorded history until this century. So here's a real question. Would you swim in water that looks like a postcard, knowing exactly what's underneath it, and knowing people better trained than you didn't come back? Some say the danger is optional because it lives 100 feet below where anyone swims. Others say a place tells you what it is and you should listen. Drop your answer below. Our audience splits hard on this one. Jacob's Well exists because limestone dissolved. The next place is the exact opposite. Water sitting in rock so hard that nothing has managed to dissolve it in more than 1 billion years. Number 8. Devil's Waterhole, Inks Lake State Park. Number 8 is where the water is the second oldest thing you're looking at. Devil's Waterhole is a cove at the northeast end of Inks Lake in Burnett County, the swimming hole generations of Central Texans grew up on. Pink and gray rock walls drop into water that shifts between deep blue and green with the sun. It's a no-wake zone, so kayakers paddle in through a narrow channel with nothing churning the surface, and the stone stays warm underfoot into the evening. The rock is the story. Those pink walls aren't granite, though nearly everyone assumes they are. They're Valley Spring gneiss, and according to a University of Texas geologist quoted by Texas Parks and Wildlife, Devil's Waterhole holds the oldest rock in Texas accessible on public land, with estimates running past 1.2 billion years. Granite has a random mineral pattern. Gneiss is layered, folded, and bent by pressure, and you can see those folds right where people are jumping in. So every summer, teenagers launch themselves off a formation that predates complex life on Earth by hundreds of millions of years, and none of them know it. There's also a practical detail here that matters more than the scenery. Most Highland Lakes reservoirs rise and fall hard with drought, which is why so many hill country swimming spots become mudflats in a bad year. Inks Lake works as a pass-through lake, water flowing in from one reservoir and out toward the next, so the level stays near constant no matter how brutal the summer gets. As for the name, local telling holds that a previous landowner swore loudly every time his wagon got stuck crossing here. Treat that as folklore, not history. Texans do have a real habit of naming their prettiest water after the devil, and you'll see it again before this list is over. If this is your speed, we're building a series on the parts of Texas that are geologically ancient and completely unmarketed. Subscribe so you catch it. There's one coming on a Texas mountain range that used to be a coral reef under a tropical sea, fossils still in it. Everything so far has been about water. The next entry has none at all, and it still belongs on this list. Number 7, Sabal Palm Sanctuary, Brownsville. Number 7 has no swimming hole, no cliff, no beach. It's here because it's the other half of the Caribbean look, the part everyone forgets when they only think about water. At the very bottom of Texas, cradled in a bend of the Rio Grande outside Brownsville, sit 557 acres of actual subtropical palm jungle. Not landscaped palms, not decorative trees lining a resort driveway. A native forest of Sabal mexicana, fan palms growing nowhere else in the United States outside the lower Rio Grande Valley, in dense canopy over vines and thorn scrub. The scale of the loss is what stops you. Native sable palm forest once covered an estimated 60,000 acres along the river, running 80 miles inland from the Gulf. Agricultural clearing took nearly all of it, and fewer than 100 acres remain anywhere. You're walking through the last fragment of an ecosystem that used to define this entire region. The biodiversity packed into that fragment is absurd. Over 300 plant species and over 300 bird species have been recorded here, and a Texas A&M survey identified more than 1,000 beetle species in the palm grove alone. Ocelot and jaguarundi have a documented presence, though sightings are rare enough that you shouldn't plan around one. Then there's the access, which is the strangest fact about the place. The sanctuary sits on United States soil, but on the south side of the border wall because the barrier here follows the levee rather than the riverbank. To visit an American nature preserve, you drive through a gate in the wall. Audubon acquired the property in 1971 and later closed it to the public after the barrier isolated it. Since 2010, the Gorgas Science Foundation, a Brownsville nonprofit, has run it and reopened it to daylight visitors. Walk the trails at dawn and the sound is what gets you. Chachalaca screaming in the canopy, green jays working the understory, insects at a volume that reads tropical rather than Texan, and the dry rattle palm fronds make when wind moves through them. Standing in it, the only thing reminding you what country you're in is the steel. That's the tropical half of the look with the water removed. Number 6 puts the water back, and it arrives with a reputation that turns out to be entirely invented. We also still haven't reached the desert pool from the opening of this video. Stay with me because it's worth the wait. Number 6, Possum Kingdom Lake. Number 6 is a North Texas lake that is the wrong color on purpose. Roughly 80 miles west of Fort Worth, the Brazos cuts a canyon through the Palo Pinto Mountains, and in 1941, the Morris Shepherd Dam sealed that canyon and backed the river into it. The result is around 17,000 surface acres with more than 310 miles of shoreline, bluer and clearer than a North Texas reservoir has any right to be. The reason is depth. The canyon walls that made this a good dam site also made the lake deep, roughly 145 feet near the dam, and deep water holds sediment down instead of stirring it into suspension. The clarity supports scuba diving along the cliff faces, an outlier in a state where most reservoirs run the color of coffee with milk. The landmark is Hell's Gate, a break where the cliffs split open into a protected cove with rock walls rising straight out of the water on both sides. There's no road to it. You arrive by boat or you don't arrive. Red Bull has held cliff diving events here, which tells you what the drop looks like. Anchor inside the cove on a July afternoon and the acoustics turn strange. Engines, voices, music from other boats all bounce off the rock and come back a half second late. Heat radiates off the limestone long after the sun drops, and the water goes from green to bottomless blue about 10 feet out. Now, the thing most people think they know about this lake is wrong. If you were alive in the 90s, the name registers because of the Toadies song, which spawned decades of rumors about murders and hauntings passed around as local lore. Frontman Vaden Todd Lewis has since said plainly that he made it up. He picked the setting because his family vacationed there and the place is full of names like Hell's Gate. That's it. The dark reputation of this lake is alternative rock fiction that outlived its own author's explanation. The real disaster was slower and much worse. During the drought of 2011, the Possum Kingdom complex fires burned over 100,000 acres and more than 100 homes. And according to Texas Parks and Wildlife, roughly 90% of Possum Kingdom State Park went with them. The one upside, land manager's name, is that the fire cleared out invasive cedar and let native species return. And something else went under long before that. When the dam filled the valley in 1941, the town of Pickwick was submerged. It's still down there. Real history nobody discusses, fictional history everybody repeats. Possum Kingdom has both, and the fake one is winning. Tell me which version you'd rather visit, because number 5 is the reverse. It earned a hard reputation, honestly, and the state agrees so completely that it limits visitors to a number you're not going to believe. Number 5, Devil's River. Number 5 is the clearest water in Texas, and the state issues 12 permits a day for it. Out in Valverde County, where the Chihuahuan Desert, the Edwards Plateau, and the South Texas brush country collide, there's a spring-fed river that runs a shade of turquoise photographing like the Yucatan. Texas Parks and Wildlife's own magazine calls the Devil's Turquoise, and the deeper stretches of nearby Lake Amistad, Cobalt. This isn't a river with one good stretch. It's that color along its length, because it's fed by springs pushing filtered groundwater through limestone rather than surface runoff carrying mud. It is also the hardest place on this list to visit legally. The state natural area covers more than 37,000 acres across 2 units. Entry requires a reservation and an in-person orientation with staff, and the gates open Friday through Monday only. Getting there means 22 miles of rough gravel road, and official guidance recommends a minimum 8-ply tire rating specifically to avoid blowouts. There's no drinking water on site, and the nearest full-service station is over 60 miles away. The river is permitted separately. Texas Parks and Wildlife issues a maximum of 12 individual access permits per day for overnight paddle trips and 12 more for day trips. Not 12 boats, 12 people. Nearly every acre along the banks outside a few designated access points is privately owned, so camping anywhere else is trespassing. The payoff for all that friction is silence. Not quiet, silence. No road noise, no aircraft, no other paddlers, just water moving over limestone shelves and wind in the cane. The river runs clear enough that a canoe throws a sharp black shadow onto the gravel 8 feet below it, and you spend half the trip watching that shadow instead of the scenery. This is a corridor that looks the way it did before anyone wrote anything down about Texas. It's an international dark sky sanctuary, so the night sky over the canyon is protected as carefully as the water. Dolan Falls, often called the highest volume waterfall in the state, sits downstream on Nature Conservancy land and can only be reached by a multi-day paddle. Here's the remarkable part. The permit system exists because the state understood something most agencies learned too late. This river cannot survive being popular. So instead of building a parking lot and watching it degrade, they capped it at 24 people a day in a state of 30 million. If remote, permit-only, off-grid places are what you're here for, subscribe, Jank. We've got a full episode coming on the Texas borderlands, the ghost towns, and the stretch of the Rio Grande most Americans couldn't find on a map. Devil's River keeps people out with distance. The next place keeps them out with paperwork, and unlike everything else so far, you have almost certainly already seen a photograph of it. Number 4. Hamilton Pool Preserve. Number 4 is the one you might already recognize, and I'm going to be upfront about that instead of pretending otherwise. About 23 miles west of Austin, near Dripping Springs, Hamilton Creek pours over a limestone lip and drops roughly 50 feet into a jade green pool inside a stone amphitheater. The remains of a cave-ceiling arch overhead, hung with stalactites and draped in maidenhair fern and moss. Cliff swallows nest in the rock. It looks engineered by a film studio. It was made by collapse. Thousands of years ago, an underground river ran through a limestone dome here, and erosion ate at it until the roof gave out. The slabs scattered around the pool's edge are pieces of that ceiling. You're swimming inside the wreckage of a cave. Here's the honest caveat. Hamilton Pool is not a secret. It's one of the most photographed natural swimming holes in the country, and pretending you'd be discovering it would insult your intelligence. What it is instead is one of the most aggressively managed. Reservations are mandatory, the lot holds about 75 vehicles, and the preserve runs 2 time slots a day. The trail down is a quarter mile of steep, uneven rock, about 15 minutes each way, and closed-toe shoes are required. And a reservation does not buy you a swim. The water isn't chemically treated, so bacteria levels are tested regularly, and swimming gets suspended whenever numbers come back wrong or rockfall risk rises. People drive from Austin, make the hike, and get told they can look but not enter. No refunds. That combination, famous, restricted, unreliable, filters the crowd in a way ordinary popularity never does. And the site earned that protection the hard way. Texas Parks and Wildlife named it the most significant natural area in rural Travis County in 1980, by which point decades of unregulated crowds and grazing had wrecked it. Travis County bought 232 acres in 1985 and began restoration. The fern-covered cliffs you see now are 40 years of deliberate repair, not luck. So here's the dilemma. Would you rather have free, unrestricted access and watch a place slowly get destroyed, or pay, book weeks ahead, and accept a real chance of being turned away at the water's edge? Texas has run both experiments. Tell me which side you're on. Hamilton Pool is what happens when a cave ceiling falls in. Number 3 is what happens when an entire island gets abandoned twice. Number 3, Matagorda Island. Number 3 is 38 miles of Gulf coastline with nobody living on it, and reaching it takes a boat and a plan. Matagorda Island lies off the coast near Port O'Connor, uninhabited apart from a small Texas Parks and Wildlife outpost. No roads, no bridge, no ferry. The state ran a daily boat until 2003, when a fire destroyed the vessel and the service died with it. Your options now are your own boat across Espiritu Santo Bay, a hired shuttle from Port O'Connor, or roughly 10 miles of paddling through marsh and bayou if that sounds like fun to you. What waits on the other side is 39 miles of Gulf beachfront with no condos, no hotels, no structures at all. The shelling is exceptional, and because these beaches fall under general land office management rather than standard park rules, you're allowed to keep what you find, which isn't true at most Texas state parks. The history layered on top of that emptiness is where it gets strange. At the north end stands a cast iron lighthouse first lit in December 1852, built to guide ships through Pass Cavallo toward the port of Indianola. During the Civil War, Confederate forces tried to destroy it to keep it from Union hands, damaging it badly enough that it was rebuilt on a new site in 1873. It went dark after automation in 1959 and was relit at midnight on the last day of 1999 following a restoration that ran past $1 million. Then there's the airfield. In 1942, the military built a bombing and gunnery range here to train pilots, and it ran until the Air Force closed it in 1975. The runways are still out there, cracked and half swallowed by sand, serving now as the island's road network. People bike along old military pavement to reach a lighthouse from the 1850s, past 3 historic cemeteries, on an island with no residents. Wildlife filled the vacuum. Whooping cranes, among the rarest large birds left in North America, winter in the Bayside Marsh. The Gulf side runs clearer than beaches further north for the same reason it does everywhere on the lower coast. You're far enough from the big river mouths that the silt has dropped out. On a calm day with the sun overhead, the shallows go green and you can see your own feet, standing on a beach where the only footprints are yours. That's the last coastline you'll see until number 1. Because number 2 isn't on the coast at all. It's 400 miles inland in the middle of a desert, and it's the place I promised you in the first 20 seconds of this video. Number 2, Balmorhea State Park. Number 2 is the promise from the top of this video and the strangest body of water in Texas. Drive west until the mesquite thins out and the oil country starts. Keep going until you're a couple hundred miles east of El Paso, and in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert, the ground opens up and hands you a swimming pool. San Solomon Springs feed a basin of roughly 1.3 acres holding around 3.5 million gallons, up to 25 feet deep. Texas Parks and Wildlife calls it the largest spring-fed swimming pool in the world. The numbers break your brain. More than 15 million gallons push through it every day, with some measurements putting the spring system's total output between 22 and 28 million gallons daily. That flow is high enough that the pool needs no chlorination at all. It replaces itself constantly. The temperature holds between 72 and 76 degrees year-round, because the water is simply the temperature of the rock it traveled through. In August, that's relief. In January, it's steam rising off the surface at dawn, and the water is old, verifiably old. Most of the flow comes from a regional aquifer system originating roughly 400 miles to the northwest, moving through porous limestone and along fault lines that behave like natural plumbing before being forced upward. Isotopic analysis commissioned through Texas Parks and Wildlife indicates the base flow feeding these springs is more than 10,000 years old. When you get in, you're swimming in rain that fell before agriculture was invented. Now look down. The bottom isn't tile. In the deeper sections, it's natural rock and sand, with the springs lining the floor about 25 feet beneath you. Fish live in here. Turtles live in here. 2 endangered desert species, the Comanche Springs pupfish and the Pecos gambuzia, depend on this system to exist at all. Snorkelers hover over the vents, watching sand move where the water pushes up. The Civilian Conservation Corps built the structure by hand in the mid-1930s, a New Deal project that put unemployed men to work during the Depression. It has needed help since. The pool closed in May 2018 after decades of spring flow eroded the concrete under the diving board, reopening in March 2019 after roughly $2 million of repair. The larger threat is quieter. Flows have declined by about a third since the 1950s. In 2016, the Apache Corporation announced a major oil and gas discovery across hundreds of thousands of acres surrounding the park, and Texas Parks and Wildlife responded with an unprecedented biomonitoring program, cataloging every species dependent on the springs to set a baseline before drilling began. The company pledged not to drill its Balmorhea leases and put $1 million toward the pool repairs. Whether the aquifer holds is still an open question, and researchers launched a dedicated collaborative in 2026 to study study where this water comes from and why it's slowing down. So think about this one. If a place has existed for 10,000 years and might not last another 100, does that make you more likely to go, or does it feel like showing up to say goodbye? I know where I land. Tell me where you do. Balmorhea holds the oldest water in Texas. Number 1 sits on the youngest land in Texas, and there are 3 sunken Spanish ships buried off the end of it. Number 1, Padre Island National Seashore. Number 1 is the payoff for the whole framework, and it holds a world record almost nobody in this country can name. South of Corpus Christi, Padre Island National Seashore protects roughly 70 miles of coastline and about 65.5 miles of Gulf Beach. It is the longest undeveloped stretch of barrier island left on Earth. Not in Texas, not in America, on the planet. The reason you've never heard that statistic is that the name gets constantly confused with South Padre Island, the spring break destination roughly 100 miles further down. This is the opposite of that. There is essentially nothing here. Dunes, grassland, tidal flats, and 130,000 acres separating the Gulf of Mexico from the Laguna Madre, a hypersaline lagoon so rare that only a handful exist anywhere on Earth. Here's where the geography argument from the top of this video closes. The murky brown water people associate with the Texas coast is not pollution and never was. The Mississippi and Atchafalaya dump enormous sediment loads into the Gulf, and a prevailing east to west current carries that silt hundreds of miles toward Texas. Add the Brazos and Trinity emptying near Galveston, add shallow water that stirs easily in wind, and you get the color the upper coast is famous for. Travel far enough south and you outrun it. Down here, the water goes green and blue, clear enough on a calm fall day to see the sand ripples under your feet. The wildlife shows how well the protection worked. This is the most important nesting beach in the United States for the Kemp's Ridley, the most endangered sea turtle in the world. And unusually, they nest during daylight, roughly April into early July. When conditions allow, the park releases hatchlings publicly at dawn, hundreds of turtles the size of a bottle cap moving toward the surf while people watch from behind a rope. More than 380 bird species have been recorded here, close to half of every species documented in North America. The access rules are unusually generous for a place this protected. All but about 4 miles of beach is open to vehicles, so you can drive down the sand until every trace of civilization disappears behind you and camp there. Past a certain point, you need 4-wheel drive, and past a further point, you need to accept there's no cell service, no water, and nobody coming to help you. And then there's what's buried off the south end of it. In April 1554, a Spanish treasure fleet left Veracruz bound for Spain. A storm scattered it, and 3 of the 4 ships ran aground on the sandbars off Padre Island, with roughly 300 people aboard. The National Park Service calls it the greatest disaster to befall the Spanish fleet in the New World up to that point. What happened next is worse than the wreck. Some drowned reaching the beach. The rest started walking south toward Veracruz, along a barrier island with no fresh water, and almost none arrived. Of that overland party, exactly 1 man is known to have made it, a Dominican friar named Marcos de Mina, who survived because he was wounded badly enough to be left for dead, then crawled south alone. His account is among the earliest first-hand descriptions of the Texas coast in existence. 2 of the 3 wrecks were located in the 1960s and are protected now within the National Seashore. Cannons, silver ingots, and navigation instruments from the San Esteban sit in a museum in Corpus Christi. The 3rd ship has never been found. Stand on that empty beach and you're on the youngest land on this list, on top of the oldest disaster on it. And the island itself is a newcomer. Radiocarbon dating of shells puts Padre Island at only about 4,500 to 5,000 years old. It's still moving, still reshaping with every hurricane, still unfinished. The oldest thing on this list is 1.2 billion years old, and the last thing on it is younger than the pyramids. That's the real answer to the question this video opened with. Texas didn't build any of this. Limestone, deep time, ancient aquifers, and clean currents did, and the only thing people managed to do right was occasionally leave it alone. If this showed you a place you didn't know existed, hit like and subscribe. That's exactly what this channel is for. Tell me in the comments which one you're putting on your list, and stick around for the next one. The Texas towns that were deliberately drowned when the dams went in, and what divers still find sitting on the bottom.